Okay, so in this walkthrough, we're going to cover how to create thumbnails on S3 using AWS Lambda and Python. So here's kind of what we're going to cover. We're going to create two S3 buckets to store images, and then we're automatically going to create thumbnail images once those images are uploaded to S3 inside of a different bucket. So that's why we have to create two buckets. We are going to then also need to create the necessary policies and execution roles for Lambda so that they can actually access those buckets. Remember, with AIM and in AWS in general, you don't have access to anything execution-wise unless you actually grant that access. So that's what the purpose of creating this policy is all about. We are going to then implement the Lambda function and generate the thumbnails and test it in the console. And then finally, once everything looks good, we'll go ahead and create a trigger on S3 to automatically invoke the Lambda function and generate our thumbnails. In terms of prerequisites, before you begin with this tutorial, it's assumed that you have an AWS account. You also have sufficient privileges to create buckets in S3, to create roles and policies within IAM, and Lambda functions as well. You should have a basic understanding of the core AWS components, S3, Lambda, IAM, and Cloud9. Cloud9 is simply the browser-based IDE, so we'll cover that quickly. And then finally, a basic understanding of Java is nice, but not necessarily recommended. Okay, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, here I am in the AWS Management Console, and we'll go ahead and create a couple tabs here just to make it a little simpler. The first tab, we're going to use Cloud9, and let's go ahead and create our environment. So Cloud9 simply is a browser-based IDE. So it's very simple to use. Takes a couple minutes to get started, but let's go ahead and create the environment first, and we will call it thumbnail demo. All right, go ahead and click next steps. You can pretty much leave all of these, just with the exception I usually like to use Amazon Linux 2. You can leave the rest of this the same. Go ahead and create the environment. That's going to go ahead and create our virtual environment for doing development. We'll come back to that once that's done. I also like to create additional tabs. So I'm going to create a separate tab that is going to be for S3. And then I'm going to do the same thing for IAM. And then finally, I will do one more for Lambda. So I have 4 tabs. So Cloud9, S3, IAM, and Lambda. Okay, make it simple there. All right, once the Cloud9 environment is been spun up, so again, this is an IDE that allows us to do some quick development. So I'm going to do a little cleanup here. I'm going to first go in and just get rid of this one file. All right, and then finally, I'm going to go over to my GitHub account. So you can kind of go to my GitHub account here. This is under GitHub, Armitchak, and then you can kind of get to it from there, AWS Thumbnail, S3 Lambda. So I'm going to go ahead and clone that. So copy that, and then go back over to my Cloud9 bucket. Okay. So this basically just has some starter files. It's going to have the Lambda function itself and a couple of policy files, or a couple of JSON files, one for the policy and one for our test event that we'll be using within the tutorial. All right, once you have that all set up, we're then ready to get started. So the first thing we're going to have to do is go ahead and create the buckets. We're going to create 2 S3 buckets. All right, and we're going to use that for uploading images, and then they're going to have another bucket that we're going to use to put our thumbnails in. So let's go ahead and create the first one. You can call it whatever you want. Just remember that buckets need to be uniquely identified. So I'm going to say RM thumbnail test. The bucket name, make sure you remember what region it was stored in. Everything I'm doing is in US East 1, but if you're using a different region, just make sure whenever you're going through it that you pick the right region. Leave all this the same. Go ahead and create that bucket. All right. Then we'll go ahead and see that it is right here, RM thumbnail test. I'm going to create one more, and I'm going to call this one RM test thumbnails. Okay, all right, leave that there. And go ahead and create that. All right, so there they go. So this is my test, and this is my thumbnails that are going to be a result of that test. So I'm going to store my files in here. All right, once I have that, then the next step is to then go ahead and set up the policies and what we're going to need them for using inside of Lambda. We'll do that next. All right, so we're going to jump over here to IAM, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new policy. And we're going to create this policy, and this policy is going to be what we're going to use to specify what resources we need to have access to as part of executing the Lambda function. Okay, so you can use a visual editor, or if you prefer, it's a little easier if you use the JSON format here. If you go back over to the Cloud9 environment and you look at the policy JSON here, you can pretty much copy that and paste it into here. All right, a couple things you'll have to do is we've got to make two changes here. Let me talk about what's in here. So this policy is going to give access to create CloudWatch logs. So that's what this first one is, allow access to create CloudWatch logs. And then this here is going to give access to allow us to read from an S3 bucket. That's going to be our source bucket. And then we're going to have access, we have to also provide access to write to another S3 bucket. So pretty much the only thing you got to change in here is you got to use your ARNs for your source and destination. So jump back over to S3, and here is my source. This is where I'm going to put images at. So let's click on that, and right at the top here you'll see the Amazon resource name. Go ahead and copy that, and go ahead and paste that here. All right, so it looks like that. Be sure to make sure you keep the / and the star. That basically says you have access to all the objects in there. And then we'll do that one more time, and this time we will select the thumbnail bucket and copy that one to the clipboard, and then replace that one here. All right, so it should look like that. All right, so just kind of do that. Once you have that, you can go and review the policy, and we can call this Lambda S3 thumbnail policy. All right, so it stands out. There we go. Go ahead and create that policy. All right, so now we have the policy created. Now we need to assign that policy to a role, because the role is what we're going to use when we execute the Lambda function. All right, so we're going to go in and we're going to go to the roles and create a new role. And then here it's going to be a role for Lambda. So we're going to be using this role as part of Lambda, so that's why you choose that use case. And click on permissions. We are going to then look for our policy. So I just filtered this for just a customer one, so I can see the one I just created. We'll go ahead and select that. Review. And we're going to call this one Lambda S3 role. And then you can leave the rest of this all the same. Create that role, and now we're done. All right, now that we have that role, we are then ready to then start actually creating the Lambda function itself, which we'll do next. All right, let's jump back over to Cloud9. All right, and we have our function here. Now let's look at the function that we have, and you can obviously change this, but I kind of want to quickly talk about what it's actually doing. What this is going to do is it's going to be part of Lambda, so the Lambda function. Whenever a new file or object is uploaded to our source bucket, we're going to add a trigger that automatically fires off this function. Okay, so the function is essentially going to get the information from S3, and then it's going to basically pull the records out, whatever was changing. It's then going to do the resize, and then it's then going to upload the resulting image to a new bucket. So couple things you'll need to change here is make note of, I should say, is that we have one environment variable, destination bucket, And we're going to use that later on when we go into the console to complete our Lambda function configuration. But we're going to specify the destination bucket rather than hard coding it. So we're going to allow that to be an environment variable that someone can specify. So that's where the resulting thumbnails are going to go. So we'll have to make sure we do that. The rest is pretty straightforward. One other thing, caveat here with this is because we want to generate a thumbnail, that's not something we can do in Python directly. So we have to use an dependency, and we're going to be using something called pillow. So this is where it gets a little tricky, and this is kind of why you need to use something like an IDE or something other than the Lambda console within AWS. The reason is that because once you start adding dependencies, you actually need to package up an entire zip file with everything in it. So it's a little more complicated. So therefore, that's kind of why we have to do a couple extra steps, which we'll talk about now. Okay, so within the terminal window at the bottom here, let's go ahead and we're just going to do and see what we have here. So we have one folder, AWS thumbnail, that we cloned. So let's go ahead and CD into that one. All right, and we can kind of see we have our files here. All right, so we've got our Lambda function, and then what we have to do in order to package this up is we need to create a virtual environment. So we're going to use virtual env my env. All right, and that's going to go ahead and install a virtual environment. We should also confirm what version of Python we have. Okay, so at the time of writing this is 3.7.9, which is what we want to have. All right, so let's go ahead and activate that environment. Actually, it's already active. Go and activate that. So we've got here so source. All right, so there it is. All right, so we're going to go ahead and we are activated there, so we can kind of see that we're in that environment. So now that we have that, we can go ahead and do a pip install pillow. All right, that's going to go down and pull down the pillow package and install it. All right, so if we did pip show pillow, we can kind of see where it's actually was installed at. So there's a location. So there's the location where it is installed. So let's go ahead and copy that, and we're going to CD into that folder. Try this one more time. Copy. Just beats typing it all out. All right, so there I am. So now that I'm in that folder, I'm going to create a zip file. So I'm going to say zip -r, and I'm going to give it my deployment package. And say I want to zip up everything. So that's going to zip all of the files that are in that folder, the site packages folder. All right, so that's all our dependencies, and as you can kind of see, there's quite a bit there. All right, so now that I have that zip file, all right, I'm going to go ahead and move it. And I'm going to move it into my same folder here. I'm just going to move it right up in here. So I'm going to move it to environment. All right, so there it is. All right, you kind of see it, there it is. Now, so that zip file is moved up there. So when you create this package, it's kind of important to make sure you follow the steps. The zip file for all the dependencies has to be at the same location as the Lambda function for your actual Lambda itself. So just make sure they're both there, and eventually we're going to go ahead and add that file in there, so which we'll do next. All right, so this all looks good here. Let's go ahead and CD back to our AWS folder. All right, so I'm now back to where I was before. All right. All right, so now let's go ahead and add the Lambda function itself. So do whatever you change. Normally you do whatever changes you need to have. There's nothing we need to change here basically based on how it looks. So we'll just go ahead and finish off and add that file into our zip. And we're in Lambda. All right, so we're going to add that one more file in there. There it is. All right, so we now have a Python package that is able to be uploaded and executed by AWS inside of Lambda. So we need to then go and create the function. So let's look over here. Now I don't have any functions right now. I think it's empty. You can kind of see I don't have any functions. They're on. All right, so we're creating a new one. Now there's a couple ways you can do it. One is you can do it through the console, but we're going to use the client tool instead to do that. But either way will work. So let's flip back over here to our Cloud9, and let's type the command in to actually create the function itself. All right, so we're going to then start typing here. AWS is the name of the command, and Lambda is the service. Create function is the subroutine we're going to use, and now we have to give it a couple parameters. Got to give it the function name, and we're going to call this one create thumbnail. All right, we're going to give it the zip file. And we're going to call it my deployment package. .zip. It's very important to make sure you specify this the right way. File b : / All right. And handler is going to be Lambda function, name of the file. And then it's going to be the name of the handler. So this is the Lambda handler that we're going to hook into within AWS. So Lambda handler. Okay. We are then going to specify the runtime is Python 3.7. And we're going to give it a timeout of 10. And we're going to give it a memory size. 124. And then finally, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to then provide the name of the execution role that we want to use. All right, so let's do that. And then the last one is going to be role. All right, so this is going to be the ARN for our role we created. So let's jump back over to IAM, and let's go to our roles. All right, there is the role we just created. So let's click on it, and let's look at, here's the ARN that we need to have. So let's copy that to the clipboard. Let's go back over to Cloud9, and let's paste that in. All right, assuming I didn't make any mistakes, let's go ahead and run it. I got something wrong. Let's see what it says here. Oh, okay. I got to fix memory size. It should be. There we go. Let's try it again. All right, fix that one up. Eventually we'll get it. We got a couple things here, right? There we go. All right, now that's good. So we got a success that time. So application status successful. That means the function was created. So now if we go over to the Lambda function and refresh, we should see our function there. All right, so now we have that. The next step will be to go ahead and complete the configuration of the function and test it out. We'll do that next. So let's go ahead and click on that function there. Take a look at the configuration. We have our permissions here. It looks like it's got that correctly, so that's our role that we created. It knows that it's a deployment package that is a zip file, so that's why it doesn't show you the code here. It's got the runtime set. It's got our handler name set correctly. The last thing we have to do, remember, was we need to create an environment variable. So we remember that we called our environment variable. If we don't remember, we can just go jump back here. So we're looking for an environment variable called destination bucket. All right, so destination bucket is the environment variable, and that's going to be that's the destination where we want our thumbnails to be put in. So in our case, it's going to be RM thumbnail test thumbnails. Let's copy that, and let's go back here to Lambda and create a new one here. And the key is going to be destination bucket, and the value is going to be RM thumbnail test thumbnails. Okay, save that. All looks good. All right, so let's go ahead and test it. So what we're going to do here is let's jump back over to S3 and let's go to our upload folder here, which is going to be thumbnail test. And I'm just going to pick a file that that I have an image. I'm just going to pick an image that I have, and I'm going to use that image as a test here. So let's go ahead and find the image and drag it over. Drag it over there. So that's going to be our file. So happy face JPEG, just a simple image here for showing it actually. All right, so let's go ahead and jump back into the console. We're going to go over to our thumbnail, and we're going to test this out. So now that I've got a sample image there, let's go ahead and test it. So we're going to go over here to the test button, and we're going to create a test event. All right, so this is where we're going to simulate a new file being added to a bucket. Now, we're not actually hooked into S3 yet. We're going to create an event later that does this automatically. But for now, we always want to test it out. So that's what we're going to do here is we're going to pass in some sample data and emulate as though it came from S3. All right, so we want to go back to our thumbnail, and you'll see this test event JSON that is also part of what you downloaded or cloned. So let's copy that entire JSON structure. Let's go back into Lambda, and let's replace all that and paste it in. All right, so this is going to be our sample data that we're emulating. Now we got to change a couple things here. We need to put in our source bucket name. And we already have our name of the sample image that we're going to be pretending that it came from. All right, so that's all good, but we got to change a couple things here with the source bucket name. So let's go back into S3 and let's just confirm what it is. All right, so our name of our bucket is RM thumbnail test. That's where it's going to look for happyface.jpg. So let's go ahead and paste that here. And then we're also going to change it here. All right. That looks good. We'll just give it an event name and hit create. All right. Let's go ahead and hit the test button. Okay, so looks like if you get the error message that I saw up there, if you get some strange error message, you might want to just, what I did was I just recreated or just resave this out. But it should work if you have destination bucket and you make sure you have this name right and save it. So let's go ahead and just make sure we test it now. So let's hit the test button again. And we got a green box, so that's a good sign. So let's go ahead and look and see that we have, in fact, had a successful test. If everything went well, we should be able to then go to our thumbnails bucket. And there it is, happy faces JPEG. So I might have to refresh for it to show up there. And there we go. Now we have successful tests. So now we know that the function is correctly configured. So the next step will be to create an event trigger on the bucket itself to do this automatically. We'll do that next. Okay, so let's jump over to S3. And what we're going to do here is we're going to go to our thumbnail test upload or test folder, like I call mine test. Let's go in there and go to properties and scroll down to event notifications. So we're going to create a brand new event notification and we'll call it auto generate thumbnail. And I will leave the rest of this blank here. We want to do this on any of the create events. So when someone puts something in this bucket, we're then going to trigger this event, and the destination will be to our Lambda function, create thumbnail. So we'll select our Lambda function, hit save changes, and now we should be good to go. So let's go back to objects and let's upload another image and see if it works. So we'll go ahead and do that next. All right, so I'm going to drag another image. This one's a picture of Hawaii. So we'll go ahead and leave all the same, do the upload, and hit go. There is our Hawaii JPEG image. And if we go over and to our other bucket, there it is. So it was definitely done, and obviously if we compared it, it's probably even smaller, so it actually is a much smaller image than we had before. I can click on it, and if I want to, I believe I should be able to download it. Let's just see. It's not going to let me download it this way, so I have to do it this way. Download. The reason I can't download it through the URL is because I did not open up this bucket to be accessible through the web. So let's go ahead and open it. And sure enough, we have a small image there. So everything's working fine. Looks like we've got everything configured correctly. And now you have the ability to automatically execute and do some operations on S3 buckets as soon as something comes into those buckets. If you like this video, please like and share and follow us. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.